Good evening, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. I hope you are all doing very well tonight. We are playing some more Golgari, but before we get into the gameplay, my Patreon is only 1 day old. It's only 24 hours old, and I already have two patrons that I need to issue a heartfelt thank you to. First up, we have SV Kovic. Forgive me if I butchered your name, but SV Kovic was my first patron ever. So, an historical moment. Thank you very much, my friend. And secondly, we need to thank Robbie for a very generous $10 a month sign up. Thank you so much, my friend. It means the world to me. So, really appreciate that. And if anyone else is enjoying the content, please feel free to follow the link in the description below to check out my Patreon page and consider supporting the channel and making Green-Black Midrange the top deck in Modern as it deserves to be. We're going to get this deck the recognition it deserves. We're all going to work together to make this archetype as lean and as refined and as powerful as we can get it. The second quick thing I want to say is that I do hear the requests for some specific matchups. Basically, as you all know, I do not have unlimited time, to play matches on this channel, so I kind of have to take what comes across my plate in terms of matches that are interesting and offer worthy gameplay. Now, if there's a choice between a few, I will lean toward showing Tier 1 matches, especially Tier 1 matches that we have not yet featured on this channel. So know that I am on the hunt still for a match against Green Tron and a match against Humans. Those are two big standout ones that I haven't really been seeing at all lately, and probably over 100 matches I haven't seen either of them. Kind of strange, but that's variance for you. It affects the matchup lottery just as much as it affects the top of your deck. So anyway, I am on the hunt for those matches, and hopefully we'll dredge them up soon. But for now, we are against something we have seen before. It is a Tron variant, but it's a less common one. We are against Blue Tron, Mono Blue Tron, but we don't quite know that yet when we're looking at our opening hand. So let's take a quick look, and hey, this is a great hand in a blind game one, right? We're on the play. We've got the turn 1 Inquisition. We've got both colors of mana. We've got some utility out of our land base. We've got another piece of interaction, and we've got 2 threats. This is a really nice balanced hand. Now, some of our stuff is a little bit, all of our pieces are a little bit conditional. This being technically conditional, but the least conditional, of course. Inquisition, turn 1 on the play is almost always going to have a target. Scoos, the life gain and the grave interaction may or may not be relevant, but worst case, it's a grizzly bear. Trophy is our nice catch-all, but, maybe a little less desirable in the opener than some alternatives. And Tracker is, of course, nice in the late game, but we need to see at least another land to make her great. But our hand is certainly on the high side of average, at least, if not better. And very happy to keep this. Our opponent likes their 7 as well, so we will go Swamp Inquisition. And yep, we're going to see right away, this is unmistakably Blue Tron. So what do they have? Well, they don't have anywhere near Tron. They only have 1 Tron piece, and they do not have a map. So that is pretty much... it's nice to see, but do recall that Blue Tron is not as dependent on assembling Tron with immediacy as Green Tron. In fact, they prefer to really hit Tron on turn 4 most of the time, because they generally want to play at least 1 island for some of their interactive spells. Now, they don't have those either, so they have a nice value play as a 4-drop here, Solemn Simulacrum. They have a tutor effect. This is a bear that goes to tutor up a 6-drop artifact, which in our case against us is almost certainly going to be Wormcoil Engine once they see what we're playing, and that's definitely a tough card to battle through. Thirst for Knowledge is a nice draw spell, but right now, and this is nice because it gives them some significant card advantage if they can afford to discard an artifact. But right now, They won't want to discard this because they're not going to be assembling Tron anytime soon, it looks like, so they want to hit all of their natural land drops, and this will help them accelerate. They also don't really want to discard this because ours is the type of deck where a nice value play like this goes a long way. So normally I'd be interested in taking maybe Thirst for Knowledge because it does represent card advantage, but so does this, and the payoff for this is pretty high. So I think I have to take the Treasure Mage there, although, you know, none of those takes are terrible. Even taking the Talisman is not terrible if we assume they're not going to really get Tron this game and we're just trying to not let them ramp in any way, shape, or form. They're going to go Power Plant pass. We draw Tasigur. Alright, that's not terribly impressive. We do have enough threats, although it must be said that Tasigur is our most efficient clocker as things stand. Scavenging Ooze, you know, is not as exciting of a beater as Tarmogoyf would be here, but it does have a little bit of food in the yard, and one of the Blue-Tron deck's main win conditions is a lock with Mindslaver and Academy Runes, and of course that can be disrupted by the Ooze. I have seen these decks play Snapcaster Mage before too, so the Ooze is decent here. They will play an Urza's Tower that they found off the top. Well, maybe I'm wrong about them not assembling Tron. They could just naturally hit it, that is for sure. And they've got half of the way toward doing that. Talisman and pass. So we draw a Verdant Catacombs, and we're going to definitely crack in with the Ooze here. And now I think we just can't really risk them, you know, natural Troning us. If they hit natural Tron, let's say they draw an Urza's Mine off the top, they've got 8 mana on board, and this makes blue. So they can play Thirst for Knowledge, see what they draw, and then potentially pitch this if they want to keep all the other cards in their hand, or they can even play that same turn, and then who knows what they've got. You know, obviously they have a ton of really unbeatable draws that are really live if they get Tron. So we're going to set a stop on their draw step, and we're going to do that, you know, even though they're likely to play enough basic islands where this doesn't matter. It's still good practice, right? Still good practice to make them draw potentially another basic and then maybe not have one to fetch, but of course they do. And they have another Urza's Tower. Oh boy, we're so punished for the decision to hit the tower. Yeah, you know, it was just what they happened to have on the top deck. There's no real there's no real odds that were against us there, but it's always the one that you take away that they just rip right back off the top. That said, I won't complain too much until they top deck an Urza's Mine. Then my complaints will be justifiable. So the Simulacrum gets to ramp them. Really nice for them. And we went and got a Forest so that in the end step we can go ahead and gobble up the Treasure Mage so we can attack into the Simulacrum. Of course, this gets a nice value off of its death trigger, so it's a fine chump blocker, but it's still an attack we kind of have to make. We really want to pressure them. Like, we don't really have any other choice here. And they're not interested in taking the block quite yet. That is interesting. Let's stay up to date here. So, pretty clearly just going to play the Tireless Tracker here. You know, we could trophy away the Urza's Tower, right? But they're already on 5 lands. We know they have a 6th land in hand. They're already at Wormcoil Engine range. I'm not that worried about Tron any longer. They're going to get there before we end the game, almost certainly, to the threshold of just naturally casting things anyway. They do have a Fatal Push target here, so for that reason, in case I want to, I'm going to hold up the fetch land for a push activation. And they're ripping Expedition Map off the top, so yep, they're just going to assemble Tron when it looked like they were nowhere near doing so, and there's just not a great deal that we can do about it. Urza's Mine is the play. They're going to cast another Solemn Simulacrum. Alright. You got it. Okay, so here I'm pretty happy to go make my clue, take that overgrown tomb into play cleanly. Because I don't need that revolt trigger with clues around. Ooh, Field of Ruin is an interesting draw too. That's definitely a nice one. It's going to get us another clue, and now we can mess with Tron if we want to. But, you know, again, 1, 2, 3, yeah. So, we're hitting the tower again. This time it is definitely the correct decision because, of course, they're less likely to draw one naturally. Because we've already got one out of their deck before we got rid of this one. So now they're back off Tron. Of course, they're at the point where they can naturally cast Wormcoil Engine and Karn, and, you know, potentially an Ugin next turn as well. However, we do have Assassin's Trophy. That's definitely our new plan. So the really nice thing about Trophy is if they look like they're going to just assemble turn 3 Tron, and we have reason to believe that we will not beat that, which is almost always the case against Green Tron. Blue Tron can be a little bit more forgiving in that sense, but either way, Trophy can aggressively attack the Tron lands if that's what we need to do to keep them from Tronning too early. But if it's a progression like this, where they're just kind of finding the Tron lands or the tutored pieces for them, even through a decent amount of disruption, Trophy can now pivot to being an answer to their threats, and that is why this card has improved the matchup immensely. So I am attacking into their value blockers, into their potential double block, because I have some tricks to play here, and also because we just have to be proactive. So they're going to double block here, which makes sense. It shows that they are respecting the fact that I can activate a clue and just take care of one blocker cleanly and not trade. So I will go ahead and crack a clue first. This is going to give me more information. So I'm actually not that upset necessarily to trade a tracker for 2 of these. Even though they get death triggers, that's really high value. We've gotten so many clues out of the tracker. That said, we draw another Fatal Push, huh? So I like keeping some number of Fatal Push around in this situation to grind through potential Wormcoil Engine tokens, but now that I have a second Fatal Push, I feel pretty good about pushing one of these, or at least attempting to. They do have blue mana open, but hey, they don't have a counterspell, so at least not one they can cast for 2 mana. So here we get to kind of play our combat trick. We are no longer trading away our tracker, we are just winning the exchange. However, they are drawing 2, and they're saving themselves some life. They only take 3. So we've got a nice pile of clues. We've still got some good cards in hand, but they've got a full hand and a ton of mana. They're going to play an island. What do they have here? Okay, they found a Wormcoil Engine. And they found a Search for Azcanta. Alright, interesting, interesting. So that was a really nice turn for them. Oh, Thoughtseize is a heck of a draw, though. Thoughtseize is definitely a draw I am never sad to see in this matchup. We'll go ahead and lead on the Thoughtseize because that's just the correct line, and we see the Thirst for Knowledge in the island that we've known about for a long time, and we also see a Karn liberated. You get 3 guesses as to what we have to take away here, and the first 2 do not count. Thirst for Knowledge is a target I would be happy to hit a lot of the time, but not over a Karn, that is for sure. So, pretty clearly just have to pressure them as much as possible. We don't have the luxury of trying to be cute with a trophy and, you know, maybe passing, cracking a couple clues, trophy the engine when it attacks. Number 1, that leaves us vulnerable to counter magic. Number 2, we have even more urgency than we normally would to end the game against a Tron deck, which is a high level of urgency, by the way, as a baseline, because next turn they're going to probably flip this and, well, almost certainly flip this now that we're trophying the engine. And then, you know, the late game just tilts more and more in their favor as the turns go on. So we need to be as proactive as humanly possible here. We need to go ahead and trophy this thing out of the way. And then Fatal Push for one with Death Touch. You know, the lifelink is definitely live, but here we can grow our Skoos at instant speed, and that would not be particularly relevant against the Death Toucher. And at this stage of the game, I rate the Scavenging Ooze more highly than the Tireless Tracker as a beater, as a way to close out the game, and as a way to disrupt what might be some of their best plays here. So they'll go ahead and take that block on the Tracker, which is totally fine with us. Now here, this is interesting, right? So I had a couple choices. I could have, before damage, eaten the Wormcoil Engine. That would kind of force my opponent to bin whatever was on the top of their deck in order to flip the search. It would also, of course, gain me 1 life and get an extra point of damage across. That is definitely not a bad line, but because they didn't force me to do that with the use, I didn't do it, and now we're going to deploy a Tasigur cleanly through counter magic. You know, if they do rip another card off the top, if they rip some counter magic off the top, we'll be very happy. We got this in under the counter magic, and or we have 2 threats instead of just 1 on the field. That is for sure. Probably won't be a matchup where we activate Tasigur because we have a lot of clues to churn through before we're interested in doing that. But we still delved away some of the chaff there to have some of our higher impact hits while still keeping a diverse graveyard in case we find a Tarmogoyf and that matters. So Search for Azcanta is going to go ahead and mill over in Urza's Mine and flip. And they'll play the island out. What did they find? Well, they're going to fire off that Thirst for Knowledge. Alright. Okay, so they discard a Condescend and a Remand. So there you go. There's a couple of pieces of counter magic that they might have kept one of these around if I still had a card in hand. But, of course, that also depends on what else they found. So they have a Search. Azcanta the Sunken Rune, activation is live. And not sure what else. Maybe they have another piece of counter magic in hand. But we're going to crack a clue to lead off. Inquisition of Kozilek. Sure, that's a nice draw. Take a peek at their hand. Opponent is going to respond by repealing the Scavenging Ooze. So they're going to get to bounce that and draw a card. Now, if they had paid, 4 more mana, which they could have, they were live to bounce the Tasigur instead. But here, this lets them do a few things. It lets them potentially play whatever their draw is off of repeal. It lets them potentially play whatever else might be in their hand, which I don't know about. And it also, of course, lets them hold up Search for the Azcanta activation. So, even though Ooze is a bit of a lower priority target there, I definitely understand that play. It seems like the right one to me. Inquisition's still on the stack. They're going to tap some more mana. Or will they? Alright, they thought better of it. Yeah, I guess they considered condescending here, but I guess they'd rather just activate Azcanta the Sunken Rune in the unstep, and we will take away the condescend because we no longer care about Expedition Map there, way beyond the point where them having or not having Tron matters. So, Kraken for 4. And then we're going to replay a Skoos in the unstep. I think that's better and more proactive than cracking a clue or bluffing, Assassin's Trophy. Alright, they find a repeal. So they might be able to keep the bounce train rolling here and not face lethal next turn. They'll play out the Expedition Map that we knew about. And they're going to go get the tower. Tron is back online. What else do you have, opponent? Well, nothing good enough yet, because they're going to go digging with Azcanta. They will find a Thirst for Knowledge. Okay, so definitely a turn with a lot of actions taken by them and a lot of value accrued, but they don't feel comfortable enough to fire off the Thirst main phase, so they definitely want to, hold up this repeal and potentially one other card that we don't know about. So, just going to go ahead and take him back off Tron. It might not matter overall, but it kind of matters this turn, or at least it forces them to take action this turn. So opponent will respond. They're going to float the 3 mana, and they will cast a Thirst for Knowledge. They're going to leave a colorless floating. See what they can find. Alright, they will pitch a Talisman of Progress, so that was just a clean draw 2. And then they're going to repeal our ooze again. Okay, fair enough. And yeah, they've got they've got 8 basics on the field. Yeah, they're never going to run out of basics. Makes sense. Makes sense. So after that, we'll crack a clue. We find a treetop village. That's not the most exciting, but could become relevant. We're never really going to turn that down in a matchup like this. And we're going to try to replay an ooze. Yep, that'll do it. That'll resolve. Okay, fair enough. So our opponent's at 4. As I identified earlier, the Taziger clock is proving quite valuable here. They've got an Urza's Power Plant. Not quite Tron, is it? But hey, they're still going to tap out for a Tron piece, and that's going to be a Karn Liberated. Alright. Taking away our Taziger. Doesn't feel great. Ooh, this looks desperate. They're going to fire up an Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin, in the main phase, so they must not have much in hand, and the best they can do off of it is a Remand. Well, that looks like good news for us, because they are dead on board if we just gobble up a couple creatures with the ooze. And we'll go ahead and move to attacks. We're going to swing at them. And our opponent doesn't even make us activate, they will just scoop it up. So yeah, definitely a really interesting game in my opinion. So we had some pretty good tools in the main deck, and we saw them early enough to realistically keep them off of Tron. They just kind of assembled it anyway with some decent top decks, and even if they hadn't, they were ramping well enough with this Talisman and with their Simulacrums that, you know, they kind of got to that 5, 6, 7 mana danger zone pretty quickly anyway. So there was a fair amount of interaction on both sides, and notice how crucial it was that we were able to immediately answer the Worm Coil with this Assassin's Trophy. The turn the Worm Coil came down, they played Worm Coil into Search for Azcanta, and then they said go, and they were totally tapped out. So on their end step, we trophied the Worm Coil, or maybe it was on our following turn, I don't quite recall. But anyway, before we went to our next attack step, we trophied the Worm Coil, we pushed a token, and we just got back to clocking them. That was so necessary. That was absolutely crucial. The fact that, like I said, Trophy can attack the Tron lands, but perhaps more importantly on the whole, can attack and remove the Tron payoff cards. Now that is definitely a powerful, powerful tool to have in our deck. Just the fact that we have main deckable cards that are not cold to some of the gigantic payoffs is a big improvement in this match. But it's far from a free win card, right? Because no matter what their payoff is, Worm Coil Engine's going to leave behind a couple tokens. Their Planeswalkers are going to get activations. You know, the strong majority of their payoffs will get some kind of 2-for-1 or even 3-for-1, maybe even 4-for-1 out of this, because of course we give them a basic land too. That sounds really bad on paper, and in some ways it is, but we need to just have an answer to those things, period. And we had very few of them in the deck before Trophy was printed, so that played a crucial role in this matchup. But of course, Tracker was amazing as always. Scavenging Ooze, Taziger, these cards all came together to close out the game in a relatively timely fashion. You know, it was turn 9, but considering all the time we spent having to disrupt them, and all the time we spent fighting through their disruption, their repeals especially were nice tempo plays. Yeah, turn 9 was enough to get it done. So I do have a sideboard tech against Blue Tron already. on the channel, and I will link to that in the description below. The big change here is that we now have a second Fulminator Mage in the sideboard, and we will for sure be bringing that in at the expense of I guess, probably a Liliana the Last Hope, because we have two, and one of them is a pretty free cut. And if we already had to bring her out, then who knows, trim around the edges somewhere else. But the sideboarding should be more or less the same, but we just definitely need access to that second Fulminator Mage. There's no question in my mind about that. So let's go on to game 2. We'll be on the draw and see how it goes. Alright, everybody, game 2 against Blue Tron. We are on the draw, and our hand is very binary. We do one thing, basically, and we do that one thing very, very well, and that is hand disruption. Now, Inquisition is a card that can sometimes blank against Tron decks, maybe a little less overall against Blue Tron than against Green Tron, because even in the mid to late game, they're likelier to have some lower curve stuff still in their hand. But still, as far as hand disruption goes, this is completely perfect, because we want our Inquisitions as early as possible. We want to draw our Thought Seizes more into the mid game. We're never unhappy to see this Thought Seizes, but if we were constructing the ideal sequence of those, it would look something like this. We've got Inquisitions and Duresses early on. That's beautiful. We do have a threat to play on what looks like turn 3, partially because we're interested in hand disruption, and partially because our lands might not give us a access to 2 mana on turn 2. But in Ooze, like I said, it's kind of a medium threat in the matchup. It definitely has some play to it. It's definitely not a bad one, but in some instances we might just want the Tarmogoyf just crashing in. But I will take it. I don't think this is a hand we can throw back. Like I said, it is very binary. We don't have any land destruction. We didn't see any of the really high impact sideboard cards like Choke. But hey, like I said, we're doing one thing basically and doing it very well. I think this is definitely a keep. Our opponent's going to mulligan. They're in a mulligan again. Wow, and our disruption is looking that much better. So they're going to keep on 5. Now, Tron can mull the 3 and still beat you, that is definitely for sure. But hopefully our disruption will be even more backbreaking than it was already going to be. Maelstrom Pulse is a very nice draw. That's definitely a card I want access to in this matchup. And we will lead on the Inquisition. We will see Wormcoil Engine and an island. They're only on 2 lands, and their real payoff card costs 6. Thirst for Knowledge and Repeal, huh? Well, Repeal cannot do anything unless I give it a target. So I think I should take Thirst for Knowledge here, because this is a card that's just going to kind of help dig them back out of the hole they're already in from mulling to 5. And Repeal will sit dead in their hand until I decide to give it a target. So before I give it a target, I will plan to take it away with a discard spell. So Thirst for Knowledge is the clear take there. And we're looking like we're in a really strong position. No question about that. Opponent will play out that island. And they're going to pass Assassin's Trophy. Wow. Sometimes you just have it all. Looks like we just have it all. So once again, we're going to lead on the Inquisition here. Doesn't really matter whether we Inquisition or Duress, because neither one can hit the Wormcoil Engine. So I think Inquisition is a little narrower overall. Like, they're likelier to be able to play out their CMC 3 or less stuff over the next couple turns, whereas Duress, I can maybe cast Duress on turn 5, 6, 7, and they might still have a Karn in hand or something to take. So I think using the Inquisition here makes more sense, and they drew an Urza's Tower, so that's pretty good for them. That's a start. But I'm pretty happy to just be able to take that Repeal. They now have no interaction. They're very behind on cards, and they're, maybe they're just going to rip Tron off the top again, but for now they are pretty far behind on that too. We will play out the Tarmogoyf because, like I said, sometimes you just want that the fastest clock possible, and we are certainly in a situation where that is the case. All right, they play an island. They're making the land drops. That is step one. We draw another Assassin's Trophy, huh? Very interesting. So what do we do here? We could trophy a Tron land. I don't actually really like that much. I think, like, if they're hitting land drops, they're not hitting gas. If they're not hitting gas, the only gas they might have in hand is this worm coil engine, and we have the tools to beat a worm coil engine. We could cast a duress, but that could whiff. There's only one unknown in hand, and the one known would not be a legal take. So we could, and of course Maelstrom Pulse has no targets right now, so we have, all those are options, but I don't think they're good ones. Our good options, in my opinion, are to fire up the Treetop Village, and we're going to get in for 5, or play a Scavenging Ooze, and, you know, kind of take a turn off of being as attack heavy as possible to develop our board, and perhaps increase our clock in the long run. I kind of like playing the Skoos here. They could have some kind of removal spell, I don't know what it might be, Spatial Contortion, Dismember, something like that. I don't want to lose this Treetop Village because I'm a little bit behind on my land drops here, and of course this is a really nice threat. And I'm going to play the Skoos in the main phase in case they have who knows what, some play that could grow the Tarmogoyf, but they don't. The Skoos is just going to resolve, and we're just going to get in for 2. We get to hold up a Skoos activation. They find another power plant, they're going to pass. So no Tron yet, but they haven't missed a land drop yet after mulling to 5 and keeping a 2-lander. So this is kind of what they needed to do to stay in this game. End step, we're free to eat a card here because they're both instants. We're not shrinking the Tarmogoyf by doing so. And like I said, I have seen Snapcaster in these decks before. I believe my other video on this channel features a Blue Tron player that was running a couple Snapcasters. So, you just play around the little things. Play around every little thing if it doesn't hurt you otherwise to do so. There's no reason not to. Our incentives here have not changed. Trophying a Tron land still is even worse than it was last turn. Duress is still just as likely to blank as it was last turn. So here we have enough threats on board that we feel comfortable firing up the Treetop, especially because we drew a 3rd land, so we can still pulse if they somehow kill our Treetop Village. But they don't, so we just get to hit them for 7, pass the turn. Alright, Talisman of Progress. Okay, so next turn they will be able to cast the Worm Coil Engine. No need to eat anything on our end step with the Ooze, and wow, was Thoughtseize a timely draw? So we have not choked them out or destroyed any lands, but and our clock has been only average. It's only been okay, but leaving those things aside, this has been kind of a nut draw for us. Our hand disruption has just been brutal. So we see the Worm Coil that we knew about. We also see a card called Squelch. Counter target activated ability to draw a card. Well, that's a pretty spicy one. But we obviously take the Worm Coil with Thoughtseize, and then we get to just take the Squelch with Duress. Now, maybe we could have fired up Treetop. Whatever. I'm happy to just take away their hand completely. And just for good measure, just for style points, we are going to spend a trophy on the tower, because there's just no way anything they rip off the top is going to beat us through Pulse and Trophy. When we're cracking in for 7 here, it also increases our Tarmogoyf by +1/+1 to hit that land as well. They're at 4. There's just not much they can have, and they will scoop it up. So, we side in another couple pieces of hand disruption here, and wow, did that ever pay off in this matchup. Definitely felt really, really strong, and there is not much that our opponent could have done. They did mulligan to 5, but the type of counter magic that they use, so Blue Tron is kind of in a place where they leverage the color blue because they want to interact. but they can't just play like Spell Pierces and Monoliths only, because then they are totally leaving all of the equity on the table that they accrue from assembling Tron and playing, ramp pieces like Talisman of Progress. So they end up having to run cards like Repeal for interaction as a bounce effect, cards like Condescend, these 1 blue plus X spells, right, that let them interact relatively cheaply if they have to, but also let them scale really well with the power of their land base, right? Our 1 mana discard spells line up so well against that stuff that even if they had kept a 7, I had every faith that we would have just run them over in this game in a pretty similar fashion, to be honest. I don't think Blue Tron is beating a progression of Inquisition into Tarmogoyf, into, I guess we played Scavenging Ooze next, but even if they had played more rapidly to the board, assembled Tron or something, we had Double Trophy, we had Maelstrom Pulse, we had a couple manlands that can do some work. We had the Scavenging Ooze to attack their graveyard if they're depending on that to really try to pull ahead. So this was just kind of a nut draw, like I said. Again, leaving aside the fact that we could just choke and Fulminator them out of the game. If we're not doing that, this is about as good as it gets otherwise. So I hope you enjoyed this matchup. Blue Tron is a really interesting deck. It poses, some similar problems for our deck as the Green Tron deck does. Like, we're way better off at dealing with the big payoff cards, but they still put us pretty far behind. If we're not already ahead when they start landing their payoffs, we might struggle to keep pace with them. So Blue Tron is able to do that, and it is also able to leverage some interaction on the stack. Now, I think our gameplay lines up fairly well against that, but still definitely a match that we need to know about, and definitely one that we need to navigate and respect, because at the end of the day, it is still a Tron deck, and Tron decks, big mana in general, remains the bane of BGX midrange decks, even though we're pretty much better against them than we ever have been before, thanks to Field of Ruin and Assassin's Trophy. They're still kind of the boogeyman archetype for us, but as I have just shown here, we can take him down. It can be done. It's really not that bad. We just need to know what to bring in, when to prioritize keeping them off of Tron versus spending our resources to just try to close out the game. That's really the big fulcrum upon which the match turns, in my humble opinion. So anyway, and oh yeah, also drawing a million discard spells and having the opponent mull to 5, yeah, that doesn't hurt either. So, good game, well played by the opponent. Game 1 was intense. I think they piloted really well. Not much they could do about this game, too. We just kind of had them from the start. So, anyway, everybody, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're continuing to enjoy the content. I am on the lookout for some matchups we haven't seen yet, like I've said at the start of the video, but otherwise, I am just going to keep jamming games and keep bringing you matchups with commentary, and I hope you like it. So let me know what you think in the comments below, as always, and until then, I will see you for the next video, and I hope you have a great night.